Welcome to The Good Pod, where today we're talking Elsbeth Season 2, Episode 2, The Wrong Stuff. I know that's not what they wanted us to think of. Yeah, but we're here, me, one of your co-hosts, Jason Reed, with me, as always, someone that's as passionate about stationery as Captain Wagner is about space, Marissa Garza.
I was like, this is my episode, Jason. I was like, space. I wanted to go to space camp. We got pens. We got Elsbeth. But yes, and New Kids on the Block. It was a good time.
Yes, of course. Marissa, you good?
I'm good. You're good?
I'm good. I'm very good. We're here, Season 2, Episode 2. A very fun episode. A very kind of, I know it's a show about murder, but it's very kind of a lighthearted episode. I feel like a more of a comedic episode than I feel like normally is.
I think it definitely was like setting the stage and the rhythm for Season 2, and not like we hardly got anything on Elsbeth or the cops in general. Like there wasn't a lot of that. It was definitely like, let's work on this new working dynamic between our characters and see how that goes. And I think the way that they presented the murder this week was a little bit different than, not like so different, but it was definitely stretched out a little bit more than it was. And we got things at different points. So I think they were playing with format a bit.
Yeah, before we dive too deep into the case and to all the Elsbethy stuff, I want to share some things about how you can easily and more importantly freely contribute to this podcast, support us, and don't forget to review, rate, subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. There's a way to review and to rate us. We'd really appreciate it if you did that. If you're on YouTube, you can hit the thumbs up button. That would really help get us into more people's eyes. If you are listening on an Apple podcast, you can actually write a written review. We really, really, really love those. But you can always rate us 5 stars or however many things the rating system allows you. We want the top of that, of course. And then wherever you can, hit the subscribe or follow button so that you can know whenever a podcast drops in your feed from us. As you will recall, we are now doing 2 episodes right now while Elsbeth is going on. On Mondays, you'll get your Good Wife episodes as per normal. And then on Saturdays, as you're listening to this now, you will get the Elsbeth episodes. So wherever you can help us, however you can help us, we would really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for rating, reviewing, subscribing. Also, if you want to just talk to us, just send us a note. You can always do that at thegoodpodfeedback@gmail.com. We always thank you for all your support and feedback.
Yes, thank you, Jason. I would love to hear from some people, especially like what you're thinking about Elsbeth this season. How's it shaping up for you? Are you also watching The Good Wife? Are you also on this 2-show experience with us? Let us know. It would be fun to hear from you. So yes, this episode is we're going to space. Did you want to go to space camp? I literally really wanted to go to space camp. Mainly because it was like a prize on every single show that I would watch on Nickelodeon. It would be like, Legends of the Hidden Temple, you're going to space camp. Guts, you're going to space camp. So it's like, I'm going to space camp.
Yeah, as a kid growing up in the 90s, you always had it felt like space was very, like, space exploration was a new burgeoning enterprise. So it was like, we always heard about the MREs that the space people would eat, with the freeze-dried ice cream and all the freeze-dried food they would eat. So I felt like as a kid in the 90s, you heard a lot about it. And as you said, like, you'd watch the shows and you get to go to a week at space camp with all the energetic narrators on those shows. So yeah, I never wanted to go to space camp. It never really, did anything for me. I never owned a telescope. I was never really curious about what was going on in the sky. So it wasn't really my jam. But Marissa, I just get the feeling that you were a space nerd at some point in time in your life. You give those vibes of space nerd when you were a child.
It was definitely like Captain Wagner. Okay. Like I really loved space. I know a lot about the space program, the Apollo mission specifically. I went to both Cape Canaveral and Houston to like go tour NASA and all that stuff. My parents were big into space, so then I ended up being big into space, but I always thought it was like, I don't know, kind of cool. That was the thing. It's also like now as an adult, I'm like, colonization. Don't really know if that's the thing that I want to do. But
like, our Earth is dying. We might need to investigate and see if we can go somewhere else. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like the space camp rush of the 90s has influenced the billionaire class of now. And they
Yes, for
are
sure.
definitely living out their dreams in space camp. It's not necessarily something that's attainable to me as a someone who would, possibly participate on a reality competition show. But it is something. It's like if I went on The Amazing Race, I would use my money to go to space camp. Like that.
Yeah. Am I crazy, or has there been a recent reality show that there were about celebrities that were pretending they were going into space or something? I feel like there was a space camp celebrity show recently,
Oh,
and I want to say like Lance Bass was on it from
yes.
NSYNC, who
Yes.
has been
He's
known
been to
to be
space.
obsessed about space.
No,
So
he's
yeah, I feel
actually
like
he's been to the space.
yeah, I mean, listen, this episode really kind of resembles what we've seen in our recent past about billionaires and millionaires being obsessed with going to space. I think William Shatner has been to space,
Yeah.
of course. Lance Bass, as you mentioned, of course, though the Facebook, uh, Elon Musk people have all gone up to space. They've done their thing. So that's
Yes.
really kind of this episode's really kind of taking a shine at that kind of thing. But I mean, listen, billionaires in an entrapped space hasn't gone great recently. So it's like
Oh, when they went
too
to
soon.
the ocean.
Too soon? Yeah. The one in real life wasn't in space, but in the ocean. I was like, I mean, is it too soon for to be talking about this? I don't know.
Yeah. I
But
do
yeah,
know
this.
this
Mhm,
also was a storyline on the morning show on Apple TV. There was like a
mhm.
whole like we're going to space coverage thing. So I think shows are trying to get in on the conversation. And I think that this episode actually brought a lot of different topics to the table without like diving into them, but it's like there's billionaires who go to space. What could we be doing with that money? What, you know what I mean? There was just a larger conversation around it, which I appreciated, especially because there are moments in this episode, which we will talk about, where it is blatantly clear that the writers are remembering their audience in the fact that not everyone knows social media.
Yes, and it's also fun of like billionaires not being in touch with real life and
Yes.
how
Yes.
they are either behind trends or don't know how to do really very basic stuff because they have people they can pay to do all those things. So
Yes.
it's a fun poke at the billionaire lifestyle that this show is bringing. So a very very interesting topic to think about. I thought this was an interesting. I thought this could have been an interesting episode to mess with format a little bit because I thought
Mm.
we could have really used this as an opportunity to turn this into a who done it because
Yes.
we had a bunch of cast of characters that all had different motives. I think we could have used this to actually, as we did one time last season, to leave us as the audience guessing also about who did this and why they did it and all those things. They didn't do that, but that's not to say they won't do it in the future. But I just thought it was an interesting opportunity that they could have taken with this.
Yeah, we did have a lot of like motive flipping around and stuff like that, but
Hmm.
we did know who the culprit was the entire time.
Yeah.
Well, should we get into it, Jason? Should we go to space?
Let's dive deep. Let's either dive or fly sky high in this instance.
All right. Well, as we mentioned, this case takes place at Space Camp for Billionaires, which apparently is in New York City, which was interesting to see as
You
well.
think they should have
And
done it
like
at
Captain,
one of the Cape Canaverals or one of the other
it's just
official
like
NASA places?
I don't know where you're going to shoot off a rocket in New York. Like you're definitely going to have to go somewhere else to
I feel like there's a NASA
shoot off the
place.
rocket.
I feel like there's a NASA place near me in Maryland because I feel like I've gone
Like
down
with a
there and I've
rocket launcher?
maybe I feel like I've gone down that way and it was like there's like a little off ramp like that said NASA like basically don't go in here if you're not authorized or we will like shoot you on site. So let me do some research. Tour NASA in Maryland. There's a Goddard Visitor Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. But I think that's about it. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of, but it's like it's a very like don't turn in here because you don't belong here type of vibe that says something about NASA. So I don't know.
Like government
People out
secrets.
there,
Do not
feel
come
free to
here.
check me. Yeah, do not. Yeah, this is like Area 51. Do not enter.
Well, at the Space Camp for Billionaires, we've got a couple of people. We've got a social media lady. I did not write her name down. Monica. Monica? Monica. I think so.
Sure.
I think that's her name. She is the social media lady. She lets us know she's the social media lady by saying thumbs down for both
I
of you.
was like, writers, is that really?
Yeah,
Is that really how you think someone like that would talk? I give a
so
thumbs
bad.
down, and she did it totally seriously. I was like, okay, that's a little on the nose, but all right.
That was That was rough. We have Doug, the oil salesman. There's always an oil person involved in going to space because, there might be oil in space. But this guy's name is Doug, and Doug was played by Terry Serpico, which, Jason, we have seen him before.
We have some
Me
history
and
with Terry
you,
Serpico.
not
Yeah.
we. I
Yeah,
mean,
not the
maybe
royal
members
we.
of the audience. Yeah,
Yeah.
but me and you.
Yeah, he was on Cobra Kai, which both of us were like, he was? And it's like, oh yeah, he was in like 2 episodes. But I mean, this is the guy that's like, you need an official looking and sounding older white gentleman. This is your guy, because he played like a police captain on Law and Order SVU, which is where I most
Yeah.
recently have seen him. He's on Yellowstone, of course, the show for older white people. So it's like this is the guy that's he's got that hard stone face that you just need if you need an official authority figure. That's where you go to.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
but he was definitely a familiar Leonardo DiCaprio meme point of like, that guy, I know that guy, I've seen him in like 1,000 things. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have Green Energy Man, also known as Gavin. He's basically like, I, he, I don't know who to compare him to, and he thinks he's Elon Musk but good. I think
Yeah, he
is
he,
the
he
way
gives
the vibes I was picking up
he gives Elon Musk energy, I think, for sure. But yeah, I don't know about the good part, but yeah.
for
I,
like quote unquote good.
yeah.
Um, and then we have a man who, he's just a billionaire who made it on his own. He just started with $4 billion from his parents. Neil, the
Burn.
paint guy.
That was such a burn. Like, I came up from nothing except for the 4 million I got from my father, which seems like a very directed burn towards someone who may or
A
may not be running,
certain,
who may or may not be
mhm,
running for president right now.
also a New Yorker.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it just felt like a directed jab at that guy.
Yes. But he, made it on his own with paint. His name is Neil. He's played by our good friend Ron, like our this time in the
Yeah,
royal sense. Rob Riggle, who's been in everything. I know him from the Daily Show and also being married to Samantha Bee, which is its own credit, I think, to comedians everywhere. But where have you seen him, Jason?
well, Rob Riggle is the ultimate that guy who has been in every single comedy movie that if it's a comedy movie that came out in the last 10 or 20 years, I think you could be like, yep, Rob Riggle's in it. And he's always the scene stealer in all these movies. Like he was in The Hangover, he's in Talladega Nights. I mean, a lot of a lot of Will Ferrell movies, Step Brothers. So he's that guy that's like has those 1 or 2 memorable scenes that you always remember. But Robert, I don't think he's ever really found like huge success. He's always been like right
Oh
in
yeah.
the things around huge success. But he's never had that hit TV show. He's never had that hit movie on his own. It's just he's always that guy.
Yeah, he's a professional, that guy. He's known as Neil on the show, or also known as Snoozer, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then there's a young guy. His name, we don't really know. We don't find out till later, but he's a young guy. He's just excited to be there. But those are our astronauts. I feel weird calling them that, but our space travelers, space
Yeah.
explorers on on this mission. They're horrible at following directions and are failing their training. So the fact that they are even going to get up into space is in question at the very beginning of this episode.
Yeah, I love that. When you think about the real world like thing of this, how is it all these titans of industry would ever be able to really follow instruction and follow direction because they all think they know better than everyone else. So it amazes me how these things actually do happen, where they go into space and they do things. I think the show really wants us to think that they are just sending these people up with no other support or or technical people. Like it's just these 5 people. There will be no other official space people that are helping them in this shuttle, which I think in real life, I think all of our titans of industry that go up into space have probably a support staff of like 12 or 13 people that are actually doing the real work on these shuttles.
Well, and what's happened with the privatization of space travel is that a lot of
That's a
the
real thing. That's a real
yeah.
thing. And I think in 1990 you would never have thought that privatization of space travel would even be a thing, but it's here.
Oh, but all of like the when like funding for NASA went away, those people had to go somewhere. And so they are in these companies and there's a lot of conversation, especially recently because Tesla was able to like basically catch its own rocket instead of having a rocket like fall into debris and stuff. It could catch its rocket on its landing. And it's very famously telling the story is like, we did this. We could not tell Elon because Elon would stop us from doing this. So like we
That's
just did
hilarious.
this on our own. So I feel like that's very much the vibe in the situation, to your point of like, yes, there are billionaires and celebrities going up into space, but there are people in the background who are making sure that things are running on
Yeah.
time and on schedule.
It's just this show would have you think that they're running the whole thing. Like they have
Yeah.
no help. Like because we get these simulations where you failed, you died. Like if you were actually in space, you'd be dead right now. I'm like, oh, we were actually in space, we wouldn't be doing anything but sitting in our strapped in seats, and all the other people would be doing these things that you want us to do. So it's very,
Yeah.
very interesting how they have really kind of spun this, which I guess they kind of need to. But listen, after seeing a few things from Elon Musk, I don't think I would trust any rocket ship that had the name Tesla on it. I can remember it when Elon Musk was showing off his Cybertruck, and he's like, "Look, the windows can't be broken." And he throws a ball at the window, and the window immediately breaks. Like, I don't think. By the way, this is a tangent because we love to do tangents here. I have seen more and more Cybertrucks on the roads nowadays, and they look so terrible. They look so cheap.
I
I,
saw, have you seen one in a different color? I've seen one, a white
yeah,
one. And
yeah,
I
I've
was
seen a
like,
white one.
what
Yeah,
is this Lego? What is this Lego going down the street? And also, why is it parked in my apartment complex? Like I was just like, this is so weird. I don't, and also how do you find that a usable vehicle?
I don't
I don't
know. It
every
just it
time
looks
I ask myself, why, what is the appeal of this?
it really literally looks like someone took pieces of a cardboard box, spray painted it like metallic, and
Yes.
just pieced it together and just like, this is your truck. Like it looks so ugly in person. I mean, it looks ugly everywhere. It's like it's almost, it's like, because I spent a whole bunch of money on this looks cool, but in real life, it's like, no, it doesn't. It looks terrible. I just had to throw that out there because I've
I think
recently
it's like they
seen,
have different glasses on than we do.
yeah,
Like,
like they have rose colored glasses. They have like these
yeah.
billionaire colored glasses or millionaire colored glasses. I just found that I just have to say it. I have to say it somewhere that I've seen them because we're talking about Elon Musk related things.
Billionaires.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
just I had to say that because I see more and more of them out on the streets. I just needed to let it out and tell someone.
Well, someone who might own a Tesla truck or the Tesla truck of this universe is Gavin. He
Oh, Gavin
is,
has like 5 Cybertrucks in his garage, and he is so
well,
proud of it.
and he will vape in them and he will store his hoverboards in them. And this is something that really catches the eye of the young passenger that we find out later is actually the son of Neil, but we'll talk about the implications of that later. But he's like, yeah, man, we're still going to do this, even though we're failing at everything. The younger generation gets it. This dude's so cool with this hoverboard. There's a lot of like idolization happening between young guy and Gavin at this point.
Yeah, nothing says out of touch middle-aged billionaire than riding a hoverboard, which was popular like 5 years ago and is no longer an actual popular thing. So that just screams like out of touch billionaire here.
Well, and like indoors in a train, like they're,
Well,
like
no, that was the thing when hoverboards came out. Like it was like, oh my god, it's a hoverboard. All the kids were riding them. All the adults were trying to ride
listen,
them and falling.
I was promised a hoverboard by Back to the Future. I was promised a
Mm,
hoverboard, and I was promised flying cars, and I still am waiting for them. We have passed the date in the movie. That is
mhm.
not a hoverboard. That is like
No,
a wheelie mobile. I don't
yeah.
really know what to call it.
How dare they call these hoverboards? Because there are very obviously wheels on both ends touching the ground. Nothing is hovering. You are still in contact
Yes,
with the ground. Marty
yes,
McFly did not live and go to the future
exactly.
for us to call these hoverboards, okay? You are spitting in the face of Marty McFly and Doc Brown by calling these hoverboards.
I was told what a hoverboard was at a very young age, and it has
They would
stuck
actually
with me.
hover,
It
right?
was
Like
not
it's
that.
in the name.
Yes,
It's in the name.
yes.
These things don't hover. They are touching the ground on either
Oh,
end. So they do not hover. Like, stop lying to us, big hoverboard.
Well, as you can imagine, going into space is going to require a lot of waivers, especially from a private company. So, as the team is reevaluating, what is needed based on the fact that they suck at following directions, they have to sign another waiver, and this is where we learn about Neil's love of space pens. Basically, everyone else's pen has blue ink, but Neil's ink has black ink, which he has modified his pen to include a new ink called negative space. and
And
so
what else did he add to these pens, Marissa, that I think you probably got very
the nib,
happy and
the
enthusiastic?
nib,
Yeah, a new nib.
yeah,
He
the
got
nib,
himself a new
yeah,
gold nib. I was like, oh, Marissa must be
yeah,
loving this.
yeah. I mean, gold nibs are pretty nice. I'm not gonna say. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. It's he has a point, but not in that type of pen. Like it's
I
not like
also
a
have to
fountain pen.
yeah, what is it? This is zero gravity pen, which can work everywhere, which I would kill for this type of pen, which I guess doesn't run out. It can't like stop, or it runs out of ink, but
Correct.
it will not stop up, because all my pens, even though I'm looking at you, pen, and I see you have a whole bunch of ink in your little thing, you won't write. So this one I guess doesn't have that problem, which will always work if Laws has ink. This is why I don't use pens anymore. It's why I don't write anymore. Right?
Jason, I the pen recommendations I could make
Oh
on
boy.
another day.
Yeah.
On another day.
I've started something now. I'm sure. I'm sure you have
On,
thousands of ideas for me in your brain
but
here.
the space pen was also something that came out like during our like I think I don't know what it was. At least for me, I feel like I was born in this little thing where everything was space camp. Space pens came out. You could buy it in the Hemmeker Schlemmerker whatever catalog. My dad would get like these like gadgety things. Like the space pen was also something, or like there would be like an infomercial about. So
It'd
it's
be like the
really
sharper
just
image catalog.
yes, exactly. Yeah, like really it's just a thing that I thought that would never become mainstream, which is, now mainstream. But Neil loves his negative space and he's going to sign his waiver with his
I
negative
would love to
space
talk
black
about
ink.
I would love to talk about Aaron, the space camp owner who I loved,
Oh,
who
yes, yes.
I recognize Aaron Space Camp Owner as big fan of King of Queens, who
Mhm.
he was Kevin Heffernan's best friend. I don't even remember I think his name was Deacon or something, but is another that guy. And we're like, oh, okay, I know who that guy is. But I just love how he's like, nah, you effers are not going to be suing me anytime soon. Anytime anything ever happens, you need to sign another waiver, because I will not be liable for anything. There's like 6 waivers that he had to introduce into this episode. He's like, nope, I want to make sure I'm covered, so y'all cannot sue me.
Well,
So
and I think
I'm
it's
sure at
like
least 2 of y'all got your fortune by suing somebody. So I'm not going to be fell victim of
yeah,
that.
no kidding. Well, and he's like a former astronaut, so he's like, I can't believe I'm doing this. So I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to cover my butt the entire time. Well, between the what we've seen between Gavin and the young guy and the fact that Gavin is just really getting under the skin of Neil. Neil takes things into his own hands and we just see he does something with a boot. This is what we see as the audience at this point. There's something with the boot. Neil's like, "Okay, it's time to go into the centrifuge," which is the G-force
Yes,
simulator
it's that
thing.
thing you've seen in every movie about space camp or people going to space, where they spin you really fast and people
Yes.
get sick and they pass out. So yeah, that's that old space camp trope.
And it's Gavin's turn. He goes in, he's all pumped, he's ready to go, and things go horribly wrong because everything catches on fire and he dies. So
Yeah,
something happened to the boots. We don't know exactly what at this point, but that
and you
is
would
the
think
murder at this juncture.
the murder, Miss Eli. But you would think that the fact that everyone went to rush over when this thing caught on fire, except for Neil, who was just kind of maniacally just standing there staring like, good, he's dead. You would think everybody would turn around and be like, that's weird. Snoozer doesn't seem to be, reacting at all to this, as if he knew this was going to happen.
So odd. It's so weird.
Yeah.
It's like he's watching paint dry or something. So now our heroes arrive on the case, and Captain Wagner is super pumped. He is like, this is a bespoke space center for
Bespoke. I love
training.
that. This is a bespoke space center. Like, I feel like Captain Wagner has like a fund in his savings portfolio that says space camp, and
Space.
he's just putting money in it every couple weeks, so he can save up the money to go to this space camp.
Yeah,
Part
and
of his
he's like,
401k is
Kaya,
dedicated to space camp.
like, don't worry, I have to be here. I'm the police chief, and this is what the VIPs like expect. So I have to be here. Like, it has nothing to do with the fact that I love space, but I am here. And Kaya's like, cool, great, cool. But also, could we possibly use this money to like solve other problems on Earth?
And Wagner's
And
like,
he's
"Ah,
like, no.
you just don't get it. You don't get it." But I mean, listen, Wagner is taking on the detective role. I guess
Yeah.
for whatever reason, I guess there was no money in the budget for a for a detective this episode. We're paying too many guest stars, so there was no money in the budget to get a exclusive detective for this one. So like, yeah, we're just gonna make Wagner the detective guy.
Well, it comes into play a little bit later, but he does like offer himself as a mentor to Kaya. So I
Yeah.
wonder if this is like a role we're going to see him in going forward, or at least a little bit more. Maybe not every case, but
Mhm.
maybe a case or two going forward. It was fun, I thought, to have him on the crime scene and also nerding out about space every
Yeah,
single
for
time he
sure,
had the
for sure.
opportunity to. Arrives on the scene with all of her tote bags, and she goes to console young dude. I call him young dude because it isn't until now that we find out that his name is actually Randy, and Elspeth's like consoling him and is like, "Hey, oh my gosh, losing your dad like that might be so hard." And Neil's like, "Excuse me, who? What? What are you talking about? I am his dad, not that guy."
Yeah, because Randy is going on and on and on. He's like, "Oh my god, this was his time. He was so young, blah blah blah. Like, oh my god, he was such a good guy." And Ellsworth Rightly's just like, I mean, I don't know if Rightly, I don't know if you would assume this is this man's father. He's like, "Oh, your poor dad." And then of course Neil is just like, "What are you talking about? I am his father." That's when we, as the audience, also find out that
Yes.
Randy is actually Neil Dorsey Jr., but he doesn't want to be called Neil Dorsey Jr. He wants to be called Randy for whatever reason. And we're like, oh damn, like this is, he has lost his son's total respect because this was also the guy that was calling this guy snoozer in the beginning of the episodes. We're like, oh, so you just don't F with your
Well,
dad like that.
and up until this point, the motive wasn't 100% clear. It was just like
Mhm.
Neil's annoyed with Gavin. Like that was it. But now it's like, oh, okay. Like this makes a little bit more sense. We also get introduced to someone new on at the crime scene because there was a fire. There's a fire marshal, and his name is Jake. And there are some vibes happening
There are
between
vibes.
Fire Marshal Jake and Elsbeth, but Elsbeth tells us later in the episode that happens all the time. It must be her hair, which I thought
That's
was
funny.
funny.
That was hilarious. There are definitely vibes going from one way to another, but I'm not sure exactly about the other way.
Yeah,
Because at first, Elsbeth is very freaked out by this. She's like, "Oh my, you are very intense. Like I thought I was intense. You are intense." I did want to clock something that came out in this little interaction where Elsbeth first like meets Neil,
Randy.
where no Neil,
Oh,
the
Neil, big
Rob Riggle
Neil.
guy, yeah, big Neil, big old Neil, where she's like she's explaining to him as she always has to explain who she is. She's like, "Yeah, I'm here on the
Oh yeah.
consent decree, blah blah." He's like, "Oh, so kind of so basically like a consultant." I was like, "Oh, okay." We're starting with the consultant
Hmm.
word here, so I'm like, is this starting the transition to just calling Ellsworth a consultant, as every other one of these type of shows where we have a quirky person helping the police with their cases? Sure. So sorry about that. So knocked over my water in excitement.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. Just a
Okay.
little more wet, but it's okay. But basically, every one of these shows does this where we have the quirky person
Yes.
coming in to help. It could be a person that pretends to be a mentalist, it could be a person that writes books, but it's always the person that's
Or like
quirky that
Monk. Yeah.
yeah, that their job isn't technically a police officer, but they come in to help the cops. They call them consultants. So I'm like, okay, are we going to finally stop with the consent decree explanation and just be like, this is Elspeth, she's our consultant, and just leave it at
You
that?
know, like I think it's going to be her way out. Like, I think that consent decree is going to be absolved by the end of the season because of what the lieutenant dude is after.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because later in this episode, Elsbeth like is not looking to make her office permanent in any way, and she's like, if Lieutenant so and so gets his way, and so I think that like if the consent decree dissolves sometime during the season, Wagner will be like, here's a consultancy, like
Yeah.
just like kind of like go right into it. I could see that, but yeah, I think they're laying the groundwork there, and I think that was like the first thing. Thanks for bringing that up, because yeah, it was a moment she did pause and was like, huh. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely perked my ears up, and I was like, "Okay, like this, this is the start of like getting us comfortable with the title of consultants." To be like, "Oh yeah, that one guy did say that." So yeah, like you said, I would be surprised they're like consent decree's over, and the wagon's just like, "Oh, you're fine, just hire a consultant, no big deal,
Yeah. Yeah, like I
fine."
just found this funding for this. Look at that. What do you know?
Exactly.
Um I think that's how it'll go out. Okay, so Fire Marshal Jake. We have seen in Gilded Age as playing a drunk rich man. Similar-ish, stalker, creepy vibes in this character, but he is explaining to Elspeth that there was a lithium battery and that is what caused the explosion. And just at that point, Neil's like, "Oh, well, Gavin did vape." And everyone's like, "Oh, case closed. That's it. That was it. He
As we
must have
like
had
to
a vape
do,
on him."
we always want to call the case closed, and El's just like, so fast. But it was just so funny how Neil basically comes out of nowhere from out of the frame like, oh, isn't it weird that Gavin like to smoke vapes? Maybe that did it. And he does it a couple times in this episode. He just basically pops out of nowhere and be like, hey, here's this thing you didn't know. This must be the real motive or culprit. So don't look at me. Look at this other person. He does it a few different times. He tries to cover his tracks in a multitude of ways, which is just so funny given who Rob Riggle is. He's that guy that's like, oh, hey, by the way, didn't you know this, and that? So it was
Yeah.
very funny to see him just kind of, he literally just kind of popped out of nowhere, like, you know what's funny? Gavin was a big vapor. That vape takes all these type of batteries y'all talking about. So that must be it. We can all go on with our lives. Cops, you can leave out of here. And of course, because Elsbeth, as always, is clocking things way before anyone else. I feel like in that first conversation she had with Neil, was like, you did this. You have something to do with this.
Yeah.
So
There's
Elsa was
something
like,
here.
yeah, I was like, not so fast. Let's dig in a little deeper.
Well, also, I do want to pause for a moment because now I am literally afraid to put lithium batteries on an airplane, like ever. Like, I could not. One time I left my headphones in my carry on and I thought to myself, oh my gosh, I'm going to.
I'm gonna kill
Like
this
I was
entire
like,
plane.
oh my gosh, what is gonna happen? And now I'm like even more like I have just pay attention to your batteries, people. That's all I gotta say. Do not put them in the under and the like checked baggage. I think that's where they're not supposed to go. They're supposed to be with you so that they don't like.
Marissa, you're like, oh, you probably spent the whole flight like, I've just killed us all.
I
Everyone's gonna
did.
die. Everyone's gonna die because of me. Meanwhile, there are like thousands and thousands of these laptop batteries, these other batteries in people's check baggage that if your little headphones could have killed them, these things would kill them too. You are that person. It's like, well, everyone's dead, and I
It was
did it.
like,
I've killed us
okay,
all.
there's nothing I can do. I just have to wait till the plane lands. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be
Every
fine.
noise, you're like, is that my headphones blowing up? Did I just kill us?
It was
Every bit of turbulence, like,
just
oh, those are my headphones. We're all dead, everyone, and it's
I
because of
was
me. You're welcome. Just stand up in front of the plane, like, I'm sorry, everyone. I've killed us all. Like, ma'am, that was just us taking off. You're okay. You're like, okay, sorry. You just sit back
it's
down.
the danger is real, okay? That was a public service announcement from me and also the Elsbeth show. But anywho, okay. So yes, so Neil points out that Gavin vapes. They find some vapes in quotation marks. They bring it, and Elsbeth is like, "Hey, those aren't actually vapes. They don't take any batteries. These are just smokeless air inhalers. So that's not a
That
thing. We need to find
that
this
blows up.
battery."
Yeah, that blows up that line. I'm thinking Neil, like everything Neil tried to do, is just like, nope. Like it's like this. There's a reason this can't be a thing. So that was very interesting. How I guess he didn't do his research as he should have. That these are not actual vapes. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So Elsbeth's plan is don't worry, guys. We can just look in this technologically advanced place for a gadget that's missing a battery. Like, that's all we have to do.
yeah.
So,
Like all we gotta do is find a missing battery, and that can't take a long time, right? As she like walks into this like room filled with things that take batteries. Yeah, I mean, I thought they should have at least started on that. I think the NYPD has enough of a workforce where they could bring in some other cops to be like, yeah, just go ahead and start that. We'll do our
sweet.
stuff, and if you just find
Yeah.
something, we find something. If you don't, you don't. Cat Wire's just like, forget it. Like we'll work on other stuff. Like that's crazy. Why would we do that? I was like, I feel like you could have at least started that process. Yes, there's a lot, but you could start it.
I mean,
It's
they
probably
would
would solve
have
the
in
case a
real
lot
life.
sooner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then Elsbeth goes and does what she does best and she starts talking to people. There's lunch and she goes to talk to Neil, and Neil's like, Gavin wouldn't allow what happened to stop us. We have to go to space. We have to keep doing this. And everyone's like, but what about the centrifuge? So that's when social media lady is like, I'll get you a centrifuge by tomorrow. Like, no big
How?
deal.
Why? Why? How do you think you get a centrifuge? But but I think if you asked, oh my god, why am I blanking on his name? Mark Zuckerberg, if he could get you a centrifuge by tomorrow, he'd be like,
He
I
could.
know a guy. I know a guy.
Yeah.
I can make some calls. It's like it's
Well,
probably
and I
accurate.
mean, like, no one's gonna say no to her. Like, whether or not they actually got it is one thing, but like someone's gonna
Mhm.
say, yeah, sure, and then have to figure out how to make it happen. And then Elspeth has a conversation with Neil, which she brings up her son again.
Mhm.
But this is like multiple times, even just this season that she's talked about her son. So I feel like we have to see him at some point this season.
Yeah, me thinks we're going to meet Teddy at some point before the season's over. I don't think we would be bringing up this hard unless that was
Yeah.
coming up. Because she's like, yeah, my son used to call me names, so I get it. You know, my son used to think I was cool, and then puberty hit. It's like, oh, okay, this might be more like interesting, tumultuous relationship than we thought. We know that they're kind of cool now because she, is in contact with him, but I just wonder how that's going to play out once we actually do meet Teddy. I'm curious to see what that dynamic is like.
I wonder if Teddy is going to have anything to do with the divorce case thing. I don't know. I don't know. We can talk about that at the end. In this conversation with Neil, she is talking about how, like you were saying, my kid thought I was cool and everything, and used to call me names, but he never called me snoozer. That's kind of weird. And trying to see like Neil's reaction to this. But Neil is like really not focused on the fact that like Randy lost someone he looked up to in the situation. And so this is putting off alarm bells for Elsbeth again on Neil. And then they decide to take a look at who would have beef with each other, who would want to basically kill Gavin. And this is where Doug Howe's name comes into the conversation. The classic green energy versus oil.
I mean,
Obviously they must be feuding at some point.
given by Randy, of course, because Randy's just trying to throw suspicion everywhere else besides himself. He's like, I think probably Doug has a
Neil,
good beef with Randy, so why don't you look that way and not my way? Just anywhere else but me.
yeah, he's doing a good job at that. Only to find out that, like, of course, this again was great, like audience education. I thought
Mhm.
because of course the oil man and the green energy man have struck a deal to profit off of each other, and Gavin was making money, or Doug was making money off of fracking Doug's landing to get the lithium for all of his green energy initiatives. So this is like this debunks the fact that Doug would want to do anything to Gavin because he's making money off of him. And Doug also tells us and Elsbeth that the name Snoozer came from when Neil was at Davos, the World Economic Forum, and made Angela Merkel fall asleep, which I think was an actual picture of the other New Yorker that we've alluded to in this episode. Because
Interesting.
so yeah, I thought that was funny because why would a paint man be at Davos? But
Exactly.
money is money.
Exactly. Exactly. I was like, why? Why would Neil be giving a lecture at the World Economic Forum about paint? I didn't understand that, but it was it was kind of a funny picture to put in our heads about
Yeah.
Neil and his paint lectures.
Neil finds out about the fracking is like, oh my gosh, I gotta tell Randy.
Oh,
Like
he's so
this is
excited. He's like, oh, it's like
this is
yes, I can sully my son's idol's name. Gotta run. Gotta go
yeah.
and tell him.
And but he's also telling him, like, hey, be proud of paint. I think you're admiring the wrong guy. This guy was a fracker. This guy was like taking money and also doing bad things to the environment. That's a whole other thing. Please like educate yourselves on lithium batteries. It's a whole thing that I'm learning about, which is really kind of disturbing. But anywho, it's like be proud of where you came from. Admire me. Don't admire this Gavin guy. Like admire me. I'm
Love
the one
me.
that
Love
deserves your
me.
praise. So then again, with another deflection, Neil's like, well, if it wasn't Doug, I did see Morgan, social media lady, leaving Gavin's room at one point. So they must have been involved because obviously they've known each other for like 2 hours or whatever, and that's how women work. Like
Yeah.
they just are automatically
Wait.
hooked.
Yeah, I mean, Neil's run out of people to blame. Like, at some point, he's like, maybe my son did it. I don't know. Maybe check out Randy.
Yeah. Elsbeth is noticing, looking at a picture, noticing that all the men are the same height, which will come into context later, but that was an interesting observation at that point. Then we get the scene between Wagner and Kaya where they are in Gavin's quarters, and this is a very like, I'm going to teach you, even though this is like stuff Kaya already knows. Like,
Yeah.
when you run out of places to go back to the body. Obviously, like, obviously, that's
He's like,
it's
look.
not like this is her first case.
He's like, all right, Kaya, listen very closely. Look for anything that might be out of place.
Yeah.
That's detective lesson number one. Like, hey, like I wasn't born yesterday. I kind of know to look for that, but thanks, I guess.
They do find an earring which only backs up Neil's accusation of about Morgan. So they go talk to Morgan, and Morgan's like, "I wasn't trying to sleep with them. I just wanted to get like information for insider trading," which
She says
again,
it
also very accurate.
and says this in front of two cops. Like, I just want to
Yeah,
engage just insider trading. Like, if you don't mind. Okay, cool. Just admit
they're
to a
just like,
felony right in front of
whatever.
our face. Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's
they're
another
like,
thing about
okay.
billionaires. They think they're untouchable, so they can say whatever they want to whoever.
Yeah,
It's like, I just want to do some insider trading. Okay, cool. All right. Thanks for letting cops know.
this is where she drops information about the fact that Gavin was very short. She calls him a little. I wouldn't fall for that little Napoleon,
Yikes.
and he wears lifts in his shoes. So this was, we're finally getting there. We're getting, after
Yep.
all the deflections, we're finally getting back to the boots.
Yeah, that was funny because like she tells him, she wears lifts, and right after that, Elsbeth comes in with the shoes on, and with some space shoes on. She's like, she tells our people like, oh, he wears lifts. Like, we know already, we get it. I thought it was an interesting way to I think with Kaya finding the earring and all that stuff, it's an interesting way to kind of make Kaya a little more integral to these investigations. Like, Kaya's finding stuff out, but it's also not taking away from Elsbeth. Just for Elsbeth to do her thing, and Kaya can also do her thing. So I thought it was an interesting way to make that happen, to give Kaya a little more agency in these investigations, to have her arrive to some of the same conclusions that Elsbeth would arrive to. So I think that's a very smart way to get Kaya more involved in things.
Yeah, and also like in a very by the book procedural way
Mm-hmm.
of doing it, where Elsbeth does not follow that path. Like, it's kind of telling the audience there are multiple ways to get to the right answer. It doesn't,
Yeah.
you can just go ask someone, or you can be Elsbeth and go all over the
Mm-hmm.
place and still get to the answer. But Elsbeth is the only one with the knowledge of, let me take out this insole and carve a space for this
Yeah.
battery in it. So that is her new theory in terms of how this happened. So now they need to go find a small battery, and they find out that, I lost my spot. Hold on. Oh yeah. This is where we see Neil taking the battery out of the face mask. That is Morgan's. Still trying to pin this on Morgan. So Elsbeth is going on her little quest to find batteries, and we get this montage of her trying different gadgets, different VR sets. And Jake is more than happy to spot her in her explorations.
Yeah, Jake's like, hey, you're gonna try these things. You need a spotter. I thought it was a very fun montage, and then playing with different gadgets like lightsabers and all that stuff. What was your feeling on the chemistry between Jake and Elsbeth? I I wasn't really that into it as I thought they wanted me to be. What were your thoughts on their chemistry and their spark, if you will, for lack of a better term?
I definitely think that Jake is more into Elsbeth than Elsbeth. I think it took is than Elsbeth is into Jake. I think that Elsbeth was taken aback that this was like happening, especially at a work situation. But I think he's gonna come back. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
that this may turn romantic, but I think it might just be like a friend ship type thing that helps her solve more cases later on. I don't think Elsbeth is at a place to be in a romantic relationship with everything else that's going on, but I don't know. I mean, I just putting myself in her shoes of like what we know about what's coming back with the threat from Carter, which we haven't really talked about yet, but like she's under some big pressure there. She's got the consent decree thing going on. She's got to paint her apartment. You know, like if it happens, it happens, but I don't think it's like on her mind. I think that's
Yeah.
why she's like not feeling. If she had met Jake somewhere outside of work, I think there might have been more sparks.
Yeah, it was a weird dipping of the toe into like what if Elsbeth had some like romantic thing going on. I
You hit something. I lost you. Hello?
oh,
You're back? Wait, talk again? No, not back.
can you hear me now?
Yes. Can you talk again?
Can you hear me?
Just to make sure. Yeah.
Well, now it's coming. Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm back. You're back in my
Can
ear.
you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right.
So you were saying a strange dipping of the toe.
Yeah. So this is a strange dipping of the toe into like, what if Elsbeth had a romantic connection? I felt like it was a little out of place. It just kind of it didn't really creep up on us. They're just like, bam, what if this happened? I felt like they could have done this in a more natural way outside of an investigation for us to really kind of be like, okay. They didn't ease us into it. They just kind of threw it out there. And I was like, it would work
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. I mean, and it was like right after she got threatened by Carter in the parking
Hmm.
lot. Like it was like boom boom and also go to work. It was a lot. It was a lot for her to
Yeah.
deal with.
And also the energy from Jake was just very, very too much. I was like, okay, this is just he's a little
He
too
was calling her Sherlock and he's Watson and
yeah,
like you just met each other. I
coming
don't
on very
really get it.
strong. Jake, who also we found out was also in The Good Wife and for one episode, which we did not remember. we could not place him at all. We've already talked about his episode apparently that he was in, but we just can't remember
Yeah.
him. We can't place him at all. Which also leads me back to we didn't really I don't even know if we remember, but we didn't take account last episode into Nathan Lane, who also was in The Good Wife playing a different character.
Yes.
So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, so we're doing a little double dipping here in terms of reusing good wife actors in different roles, which is interesting. I guess there's only so many actors to go around, so we got double dip sometimes. I don't know.
Well, the heart wants what the heart wants. The kings
Hmm.
want what the kings want, you
Yeah,
know?
the Kings like
But
bring you
this
back in a different role, I guess.
Yeah. This montage also, again, making this a Marissa episode, dealt with VR. I worked in VR
Ooh.
for a while. I just want to say she could not open a spreadsheet with the gadget she was using. That is only on an Apple Vision Pro. So don't think that you could do that with. She basically had a cell phone hooked up to her eyes.
Oh,
So
I had one of those little headsets that you like stick your phone into the back of, and it was quote unquote VR. So you're
it,
saying that's fake VR? That's FVR?
yeah, I mean, I'm sure there like to get an Apple Vision Pro like rights to use it to be able to. They're the only ones doing what's called spatial computing at the moment. But I
Nerd,
just was like,
nerd, nerd,
yeah,
nerd.
love it, love it. Someone out there's also a nerd. You know you clocked it too. You know you clocked it too.
Yeah, and these things are kind of being tested. They're not really out in the market yet. So I think that was their out to kind of get past that,
Sure. Yes.
to get past
Yes.
the
I did
Marissa's,
like
to get past the Marissa's of the world. They'd be like, actually, that's not actually true. You can't actually do that right now. To get
I did
past
like
you.
the angry robot. I did like that.
Mm.
Anywho, so Kaya on her investigation on her own found that there was a text message that Gavin had sent his assistant because again they can't do anything without their assistants, that the hoverboard wasn't working, and so this leads them to think that this is where the battery has come from.
Mhm.
They go check out the hoverboard and it was working, so we have to find another battery. Meanwhile, the astronauts are back in training and they pass the training. Finally, they follow directions, they pass it, and everyone's like, "Good job, Snoozer." And he's like, "Snoozer died with Gavin." Like, we are done with this. But Randy does give him a good job, Dad. And that I think like fuels Neil for the
Oh
rest of
yeah,
his life. Like,
definitely.
he's ready for that.
Got my sons. All I had to do was commit a murder.
I love that it took this long for everyone to realize that batteries are interchangeable.
Yeah, that
When
was weird, right? It was like, wait a minute, you're telling me that I could take the battery out of something and put it in something else? What? Like
what?
that's crazy, bro. Like I thought batteries could only be used for one thing and it would only work for that one item. That's crazy. I was like, it almost made me be like, are the writers kind of like these billionaires who don't do things themselves? Are they like telling on themselves now? They didn't realize like that batteries are interchangeable, and they only through research for this episode found out that batteries actually can be interchangeable because they don't change their own batteries, much like social media guru Morgan.
Or they have to make it like really obvious. Like they're doing everything they can to make it really obvious for the audience, which
Yeah,
is what they do in this situation.
true.
They do find that Morgan's mask does not have a battery. So they go and ask her. It's just like, I never change batteries. Like I haven't changed batteries since I was 12. My assistants change all my batteries. So Elspeth asks for the fingerprints of the assistants because the thinking here is if the battery in the hoverboard has the assistant's fingerprints in it, then we know where this battery is coming from. So they go and try to dislodge the battery in the hoverboard. And what do you know? A freaking nib, man. A
Those
nib.
friggin'
The
nibs will get you
nib.
every time.
There was a space pen nib. So this means there's only one person that could have retrofitted that battery to fit that hoverboard, none other than our good friend Neil. But before we take him down, Randy's got to like tell dad he's going to go to space, which is just like a
I,
heartwarming moment for Neil.
I didn't even know that was in question. So when he comes in, he's like, "Oh, you're going?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know that Randy was not going to go at some point." I don't know. He was in the last training mission, so I just assumed he was still going.
I do like how they do like at the end of every episode we get our, our big reveal, our big thing. I did like how this was handled with the it's time to sign another waiver.
Mhm.
Basically, you may be going to space with a killer, so
Yeah.
make sure that you sign this waiver. And that's when Neil's pen did not work and they were able to take him down. And Wagner got to deliver the line, "You're going to take a trip now, just not to space."
Ayo, but a bum. I just love how the show Elsbeth has to be like, we need to have this reveal in some clever, cool way. We can't just arrest someone. We got to make it a show. We got to make it theatrical.
It's a very like my family watches a lot of British procedurals and it's like a very big thing. Like they'll get everyone in a room and then they'll just like talk everything out. And sometimes that's even longer than the actual show. But I like the creativity that the
Yeah.
Elsbethians do.
It's fun, which is
So
the
that
purpose of the show.
yes,
So I shouldn't
yes.
take too much out of it, but it's interesting. If this was the real world, like it would be like we have caught our killer, but how can we have more fun while we're doing it?
I wonder if one day they'll have a podcast on the show.
That's this show right here.
Anywho,
That's what this is.
I mean, yeah, but yeah, we need to be on the podcast then.
Elsbeth, people, we're waiting for you. Come on down so we
We're
can talk.
waiting.
So we can
Yeah, I
talk about the
mean,
show.
I've come so close. I saw you. Like we've come so close to like talking to them. So yes, if you are listening, the goodpodfeedback.com at gmail.com
Yeah,
be great.
bring it on. Come on, we'll talk to any of you. Let's go.
Yes. Okay, so any thoughts on the crime of the week before we just talk about a little bit more of what's going to be going on with Elspeth this season?
No, we can move on to the Elsbethian of it all. To
Do you
the
want I will send you my pen recommendations after the show.
please do. I am waiting with open eyes and open ears for all of your recommendations.
All right. So last episode, we did see that a car pulled up, told Elsbeth to go in, and we talked a little bit about who this person would be. Jason, you let everyone know that this was going to be Carter. I forgot his
Schmidt.
last name.
Carter Schmidt is his
Yes,
name.
from back in Good Wife times.
Yeah.
And it has a connection to Elsbeth. And we learn a little bit about this connection this time because he definitely almost kidnaps Elsbeth and takes her to a parking garage to basically threaten her to say, like, yo, our mutual client, Mark Van Ness, is getting divorced again. There's going to be a lot of questions about his first divorce. If you break privilege, I'm going to make your life bad. I
Like
was just gonna
he
make it bad.
like indirectly threatens Gonzo. So I'm like, hey,
Yes,
we don't do that around here. We don't threaten Gonzo. How dare you?
he's the
So
best
yeah,
Muppet.
yeah, of course. Yeah, I am the Gonzo of life, so I'm all for Gonzos. But that was weird. I mean, yeah, he has Carter Schmidt has been part of the Good Wife, and even I think he was in an episode of Good Fight too. So he's been around. He's not a huge character in this universe. You know, really let you know by the fact that I heard the name Carter Schmidt and was like, who? Having to
Well,
do the research.
and the fact that they like really like they mentioned it at the start of the episode and the end of the episode, so they're like letting us know again like
Yeah.
who he is and what he's involved in.
Yeah, so definitely fun that we're getting some ties back, and you know, to be like, hey, something hinky went down with this divorce settlement. Elsbeth may have had some hand in it, knows about it, and it's gonna come back to bite her a little bit.
Gonna be a little crunchy. I think this is the like replacement for the Captain Wagner thing,
Yeah,
like storyline throughout the entire season. I still like to your point, last podcast you had talked about like wanting to learn more about Wagner's wife. Like I hope that that storyline isn't completely gone because we have this one, but I think this is going to be the pressure for Elspeth. Like Elspeth doesn't even tell Kaya. Like Kaya's
right.
clocking that something is up,
Yeah,
but she doesn't even say anything. So this is like she's really worried about this.
and I think this is gonna be something that happens in a lot of these shows where the show is trying to make us go down a rabbit hole of like, what bad thing did our hero titular character do? And at the end of the day, it's gonna be like, well, she didn't really do anything that bad. She knows of something bad that happened that she could not do anything about. So it's like they wanted to think, oh my god, what did Elsbeth do? But at the end of the day, it's not gonna be anything crazy. Or if she did do something, it was in the best interest of someone else.
Yeah.
It was her still being a hero. They never wants to look at our hero with eyes of like, oh my god, you did something terrible. So whatever this is, it's not gonna be something terrible that she did. Or if she did something, it was for the right reasons, you know?
Or she was like in between a rock and a hard place and had to do something to maybe save her son or something. Like they were going to do something
Well,
to her son.
you
I
really
don't
want to
know.
you really want to tie the sun into this. Like
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, it has to happen, Jason. We can't like there's too many mentions of it.
yeah.
So we'll get there eventually. But that is going to be the undercurrent. She's not feeling too great. Like Elspeth is the most unconfident. I think unconfident, inconfident, not confident. She's not confident in this. She is confident in her like when she's on the job, but like outside of this, she is worried about what's going on with Carter. She's putting up curtains instead of painting. She was talking about like painting her office and making it home. She's putting up curtains because they can be easily taken down. So she's still kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop in her life at this moment. And it'll be interesting to see how or if that affects her ability to solve all of these crimes.
I kind
So,
of hope that whatever is happening with this thing gets Elsbeth back into the courtroom in some capacity,
yes.
either to
Yeah.
defend herself or defend something else that some other part of this case that she's done to get her back into that environment and that atmosphere. I think would be a fun little diversion for what we usually do.
Well, Jason, do we want to talk about some news that happened in Elsbeth casting? If you do not want
Yes.
to if you do not want to hear any spoilers about what will be coming this season, thanks so much for joining us. Have a great rest of your
Yeah, I mean,
day. But
the
it's
spoiler
not that
isn't
big.
huge. No, it's just
But
it's a news about a character that we will be seeing pretty soon.
and it's a judge. So it can get us back into the courtroom. And it's going to be played by what's his name?
Uh,
Her husband,
Michael Emerson, that's his name.
Michael Emerson.
Yeah,
Yeah.
played by Michael Emerson, Carrie Preston, who is Elsbeth's real life husband, and you know that's not his only credit, right? I mean, Michael Emerson is a big actor in and of himself. You know, you will know him from Lost, you will know him from Person of Interest, you will know him from another King show, Evil. So he's
Evil.
doing kind of another show hopping here in the Kingverse. So, and that was pretty huge casting news because that's like wow, like, and we saw a little bit of the romantic thing with With Jake, I just have to wonder if they're going to try and mimic real life and show life. I think he's being introduced as a little bit of a nemesis to Elsbeth, but it could turn romantic. Who knows? Who knows?
Enemies
Uh,
to lovers is a great trope.
yeah, for sure. So who knows what this will bring with it? It's exciting news because I think it'll be fun to watch them, no matter if they're nemesis or romantic interests, it'll be fun to watch them bounce off each other and take advantage of that natural chemistry that I'm sure they have in real life. So that'll be really fun to, to see.
Yes. So we have that to look forward to. We'll see how this Mark Van Ness divorce thing comes into play. And then Kaya is going to go to college at night. She's going to be mentored by Wagner.
Yeah.
And no one, we, I was going to say no one went to space, but Monica, social media lady, did end up
By,
being the only one.
by herself, apparently. She's in that rocket all on her own. I, I thought that was it was such another thing of like, I mean, only on a TV show where they're watching this news program, this local news, and it's like, hey, two things that really really involve Elsbeth are going to be our two stories in the concession here: the rocket launch, and oh yeah, by the way, this pop star is getting divorced, and they're looking for the lawyers who did the first divorce settlement, who is charged as prenup. So watch out, Elsbeth. The fact these two stories took place right next to each other is like very, very convenient. But of course, it's a TV show. What are you going to do?
It's a TV show. And this is the podcast. That's all I got for you, Jason. Anything else?
Nah, I think that's it. I think they conveyed information to us about some of the ongoing storylines in very, very short segments that were short but really packed a punch. And most of our time was spent with the case of the week, which is a fine case of the week. It was good. It had some fun moments.
I mean, it was tailor made for me, so I
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Space, pens,
Ugh,
VR,
this nerd
nerds,
Marissa was all over this
loving
one.
it, loving it.
So that was our case. That was our podcast this week. Marissa, where can
Yeah,
people find you? Keep up with you, read, listen to some things you're doing at the moment.
you can find me on Instagram and Threads at It's Me Marissa G. And one of the things that I work on is a newsletter called The Setup, which helps people like set up technology things. And in November on my newsletter, I'm going to be talking about Notion, like all freaking month. So if you are interested in learning more about Notion, feel free to sign up for my newsletter. The link is in my bio on Instagram.
What is
And
Notion? What is Notion?
oh, Notion. Let me tell you Jason, the setup would be a great thing for you to sign up for to learn more about Notion. Notion is like you can build different documents, but using blocks of content instead of like, when you go in Google Docs and it's like just word processors.
Mm-hmm.
In Notion, you could have like a spreadsheet and then you could have word processing on the same document. And you can move things around. It's a way for people to organize information. Some people use it for scheduling. Some people use it for like podcast show notes, things like that. So I'm going to be talking about like different ways to use Notion all through November, and it's all free. So link is in my bio on Instagram. Feel free to sign up. I'd love to talk and nerd out about Notion. I promise not to talk about pens, space, or VR,
Can I
but
do
I will talk about
Notion?
Notion.
Could I put Notion into one of those headsets and do the thing that Elsbeth was talking
In yeah, on Apple Vision Pro, you can. I'm sure Samsung is going to have something coming up, or Meta most likely. But yes,
Yeah, so if you want
yes,
to nerd out with Marissa, that's
that's me.
that's your opportunity.
That's me. That's the way you can. Jason, what's up with you?
Just doing my thing, podcasting a lot. I was not on just one, but two podcasts this week. Talk about the show Married
Oh,
at First Sight. I was on my own
oh,
podcast, A Perfect Match, that were me and Asia Welch, Survivor Queen, talked about Married at First Sight. I was also on the podcast Altar Call, guesting on that podcast, talking about
ooh,
the second episode of this 18th season of Married at First Sight. So come and check all that stuff out if you want Married at First Sight content. If you, like many others, are obsessed with Love is Blind season 7, you can also find me, Asia Welch, and Mary Kwiatkowski talking about Love is Blind season 7. Me and Asia were rocking just the two of us on the finale/wedding episode, but all three of us should be back this coming week to talk about the reunion, which I'm sure is to be very, very eventful,
ooh,
with a lot of fireworks, talking about Love's Blind season
yeah.
7. And of course, you'll find me here every week talking Elsbeth and talking Good Wife. So yeah, that's what we got for you folks. Until next week, stay good.